On this episode of A Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I will discuss how difficult times force us to question the concepts of faith and religion and how this process could give us a better understanding of our lives. Stay tuned. So how are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually even excited for this episode because I've been thinking about it for a while, and there might be a lot of follow-up conversations and discussions on this particular topic. So I'm ready.
So what are we actually talking about then?
I think this episode, the way that we labeled it was a crisis of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in our upbringing, faith is a one of the cornerstones of our social conditioning, right?
Faith is?
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely.
You know, so
we're taught about God or Jesus, actually. I mean, I was taught about Jesus.
Well, from our Christian background.
I think Christian background. Yeah, from when we're in, when you're in like Sunday school and things like that or whatever. And even when you're not, I think that you're introduced to that by your parents anyways, you know. But
I don't think just because our background is in Christianity, I know that's primarily our experience with it, but I think universally we always are taught about this idea of something that unifies us as a society, right? Mm-hmm. Either with religion or national identity. But in this particular thing is faith, and I believe in something extra supernatural that is beyond our capability, you know.
Right. So when we talk about the crisis of faith, the reason that we decided that we wanted to do this topic is because oftentimes people go through challenging times, difficult moments, and in those moments, particularly when they're difficult times or you're experiencing maybe loss or loss in a variety of ways, right? Yeah. We often, and I'll speak for myself, I'll question my faith in God, and I'm questioning, where is this person or thing or element or whatever you want to call it, and what are you doing for me now, you know? And I experienced this just a few weeks ago where I was like, I just don't know if I believe in God.
Correct.
Because I was going through something very difficult, and I was like, where are you now when I need you?
Correct. Yeah. And
so, I don't want to give too much away for other episodes, but it resonated with me when we watched a movie in particular.
Silence. We'll be talking about that. Maybe in the next episode, we'll talk about silence.
So, and it really resonated with me there because I don't want to talk about this. I didn't want to talk about it, but you know, because you question, where is God in these moments, right? So can I just move forward and just kind of define what a crisis is?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, because I think that's the main thing. I think that when we go to through a crisis, right, and this particular crisis of faith, right, it's a very existential thing because now we begin to question everything. So when you have a conflicting ideas or something that either invalidates or brings to question something that it was somewhat ingrained in you, you have a conflict, right? You have that internal battle of what's truth and what's not, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like
questioning.
Yeah. So it's the questioning, and it questions everything that it is about you. So yeah, that's kind of like what we are.
Yeah. Okay. So a crisis is an existential challenge that people experience several times, throughout their lives. And such experiences will influence people's personality and identity development. And that is from Erik Erikson.
Correct.
Who is?
Erik Erikson is a renowned psychologist. Actually started teaching in Montessori schools, but he talks about the different transitions in life and the crises that come about in those transitions in life.
Okay. Yeah, I knew about that. So you passed the test.
Oh, thank you.
I have to give a shout out to my human service instructors. They taught me well.
I got to give a shout out to Amazon for me buying the book there. So. I'll put a link in the description.
There you go. That's actually a good idea to give a link because I think some people would be interested in that. So, sorry, I just hit my microphone.
Oh, sure. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. So can you just take us through what, or expand on what that crisis of faith is, and just kind of elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So there are moments in our lives, right? And I could speak for myself. So I'll think about my personal experiences, you know. And I remember being a young person and always growing up Catholic, and always doing my confirmation, my communion, my confirmation, and being given this idea that the Holy Spirit works within you, and you have to live from that point of view, you know. And I was very specific about they were Kent in particular, Ken Mullen, when he taught me about our confirmation and what the Holy Spirit meant, and the idea of power. It's about living from that point, right, in which you influence others by the way that you live your life. That was my personal experience when it came to understanding in religion, and that you have to live it, and you have to live from that point of view. But when you go out in the world, right, and you encounter different types of people, and people that sometimes say the right things and say, oh yes, I am this and I'm that, but in reality don't live by it, and they go at, you know, you feel attacked, and you feel, you know, beaten down, and life beats you down, and all these things happen to you, that you really begin to question, like, what the fuck's the point of all this? Mm-hmm. Does it really matter? It's like you see people that are non-ethical, getting ahead. They don't mind stepping on other people. They don't mind destroying on somebody else's lives. You're seeing this happening in society, where people just stealing money from the poor. So you see all these contradicting ideas, and all these contradicting things, and then you're seeing other people being elevated by being completely opposite of what you were thought.
Oh, okay.
Right? So
what you're saying is that what Ken taught you about living from that perspective, or from that basically just living the lifestyle of, like, what would Jesus do, right? Essentially, kind of, just to keep it. So being morally, being moral, treating people with respect.
Correct.
Treating others how you want to be treated, so
you
to
know,
speak.
in essence, if you boil down, and I love this because I think I would put it in another episode later on, is, you know, the ultimate tenet of Christianity is loving your neighbor as you would thyself.
Right.
Right.
Right. What would you? Yeah.
That's the ultimate tenet of what a Christian should do, and I've seen a lot of Christians not do that.
Well, yeah.
You know,
and that's what I was trying to say.
Don't judge. You know,
you treat others how you want to be treated.
Correct.
But what you're saying is that your experience, because you were talking about
in
your
my
personal
experience, yes,
that you have witnessed people who say that they're Christians, say that they have this religious background, etc., but don't act in the way that you were taught that Christians should live.
So, and not to say that I'm a perfect individual, and not to say that I'm without any flaws or anything like that.
No,
right?
But whereas you're an honest person, there's people there. You've experienced people who are dishonest and have been successful in their careers.
In their careers and in things, in a lot of things.
They've had advantages.
They had advantages,
even though they have not behaved.
You know, and it's not so much only in Christianity. It's like I've seen it in other religions. I had a privilege of spending some times with a lot of Jewish people and good friends who are Muslims as well, and I've seen it when it comes to the entire scope of religion. But it's also more than that too. It's like as we become more advanced, so there's that aspect of like people not living up to the standards of it, you know. There's that, but there's also the aspect of the more that we progress in the world and the more that we advance scientifically speaking, the more that we discover that we're just flying in a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere in some deep lost corner of a spiral universe. You begins to question, it's like, it's all this stuff reality, you know. It's the idea of what
do you mean by that, though? What do you mean? Is all this stuff reality?
It's faith in having faith in this supreme being, having the doctrine of a religion really valid. Does it really make sense? Is there really a God? You know, and if you are a follower, or if you are something, like, how come bad things happen to me too? Right? Why, if I'm a devoted individual, if I do my tithing, if I do all this, if I take care of my neighbor, why do I have to bear so much pain? Right? Where's the fairness in all that?
Well, I would argue then that that people would say, well, the reasons that we go through these difficulties and these challenges are to overcome these challenges and to be an example for other people. I'm sure, not a person who, has read the Bible from front to back, but there's passages of things that have been said, that sort of justify that silence that you experienced with God. You know what I mean?
And the thing is that what happens is that when you're going through that solitude, and when you're going through that darkness, when you're going through this crisis, right, all these questions begin to arise, right? And you begin to really questioning, like, what is the origin of all this? Is this really real? Does this really make sense?
You mean in terms of religion?
In terms of religion,
God,
it's like, let's say, for instance, you're hearing, you listen to a story, in the Bible, let's take, for instance, the death and the resurrection of Christ.
Okay.
Right. That's one big thing. And when you question religion, which I think everybody should do, you start kind of like realizing, and you start studying and going back and looking at it. Then you start realizing that these are not new concepts, right? It's not death and resurrection. It's not only a Christian concept. It's actually very pagan. It's very ancient. You hear of heroes dying and being resurrected. There's a story, for instance, that I saw in The Power of Myth of Joseph Campbell of a young boy, an Indian boy, who was concerned for his dad, was getting old and frail, and he needed another way to figure out how to make food and gain food. So a warrior came out of nowhere, and then he said, once we fight, if we fight 3 times and you beat me, you could kill me and bury me, and from there a new plant will be born. And that's when corn, maize came from, right? Like you listen to the story of Isis and Osiris, death and resurrection, in which, he was put in the tomb, and then she just came over, and from just hugging him, a new child came about. So, like, you start understanding that, at least this is what I did. I found the comparative mythology and try to find exactly what was the common thread that was in there. That's what I learned from reading a lot of Joseph Campbell's work. Because these are not... The crisis catapults you into investigation. And when you start investigating, you start really seeing that there are common threads among all religions that make sense and that are applicable to your life, right? So Christ dying and the death and the resurrection it's you dying to your either infantile, naive self, which is something that I'm going through at this stage in my life. I think most of my life was very naive about how the world operates. You do your best and you do whatever, and you go beyond what you're, give. You do more than what you get paid for. But again, you start then realizing, well, wait a minute, where is the reciprocity in that? Because at least for me, it hasn't been the case. Right. And then you die to that, and you grow into something else. But what grows out of it, it's not something that is more callous. It could be more callous, but it's not. It's something that it makes you realize, okay, I could give, but I also need to have limits.
Boundaries, yeah.
I need to have boundaries, and that's kind of like one of the first questions that you start kind of like asking, like, what does this stuff really mean?
Right.
For instance, if I was to, and this is one of the things that I always get when I used to get into like arguments with, I remember I lived in Orlando, and there's Lake Eola. It's a lot of people that go in there, try to convert others and whatever. And I used to get into these jiu-jitsu conversations with Christians in Orlando. And now, it's like, don't convert me. It's like, I don't want to be converted. It's like, just let me be. Right? Do you? let me be. It's okay. You live your life and live according to principles. Don't shove things down your throat, right? So one of the questions that I used to ask them is like, what is God? Define God. So I'm asking you right now, define God.
Putting me on the spot. I feel like, you know, I first of all, like I admitted earlier, you know, in the episode, I've had a lot of difficulties as of late in terms of really understanding what role God plays in my life. I have faith, you know what I mean? But I often feel like, what is my faith in? Because I question that. Like, what is God? What is this? Is it a substance? Is it a feeling? Is it what is it? You know what I mean? And that's my curiosity, is thinking like, do people who know what God is, do they feel differently than I do? Do they not have bad thoughts? Do they not wish evil on other people, or not evil? That's a bad way to say it, but you know, negative on other people. Do they not have these feelings and thoughts? And obviously the answer is yes, they do, because many Christians that I have known and been exposed to, and I mean, I was attending a Christian church for many years. And when I was going through my divorce, and I talked about this many, you know, many episodes ago, when I was going through my divorce, all of them turned their back on me. I didn't have one single person that was a Christian, devout Christian, that said they were Christian. None of them were there to support me. I was alone, and I was at the worst period of my life. Okay. You know what I mean? So when I think about God, I think that personally, I feel like I'm an extension of God. Okay. And so what that means for me is, I don't know what that is, but I want to live by values that are meaningful for me. And the values that I have, because I've had to die and resurrect as well, the values that I have are more grounded in protecting my own well-being, being able to say no, being able to do things like that, but also be able to give in a manner that people feel like, wow, she's a good person and she's doing the best that she can, and be an example. So all of that to say, I have no idea what God is, because the truth is that I'm living by my own values, and what makes me feel good. And what makes me feel good is being honest, being forthright, being upfront with people, sometimes to a fault. I care about people a lot, and I've had to put boundaries on that. But again, than anything, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer.
And that's the thing. You
just put me on the spot.
I know. But that's the thing. It's like you could ask that question of a lot of different people, right? And a lot of people will quote you Bible verses, right, will quote you other things. Was
my answer right?
Well, but wait, let me get to it. Okay. You know, because, and that's the thing.
There is no right answer.
Oh, that's the thing. How do we know?
I don't know.
How do we know?
I don't know.
And who's to say that they really, really know, right? So like, here's the thing that is interesting about the whole concept of God, right? So like primitive, what they call primitive cultures, right? Before the condensation of all gods into one God, you know, until we became a monolithic, you know, religions, particularly in the West. Okay. The gods were elemental, the meaning that they were the forces of nature, you know. So there were gods of wind, of the
earth,
sun,
water,
earth, lightning, you know, the ocean, gods of like human impulses, you know, Aphrodite and things of that nature. So they were very elemental when it came to things, and that's primarily the religions that the past religions that we inherit from the Greeks, even a lot of the Eastern religions of India, and there were really elemental gods, you know. So when you're thinking about that aspect, you know, you have a consolidation of one God or with all these different things, right? It still doesn't answer the question of what is God. Right. Yet there are people out there that are certain, 100% certain, that they know what it is. It's a male somewhere in the sky, and this and that, right? And to arrive at such a drastic conclusion, right, without really forethought, without thinking, and without questioning it, I think it's a fallacy, right? Because we still don't know what it is, and we're still exploring, and we're still trying to really grasp ourselves into that idea, right? So now, this is one thing that I do remember sitting. I remember this, right? And I'm not going to call out what a religion it was or whatever, but I remember sitting next to a lady, and after this experience, I actually went down to my journal and I wrote this down, right? And this lady said to me, "You are not this blank religion, so you won't understand." Right? And it pops into my head. Mm-hmm. This idea, oh shit, competitive advantage. Right? Because there is a psychological competitive advantage to know that I am this and I belong to this and other people are not.
So, for example, you don't have to call out the religion.
Just
use another religion.
Let's just any religion. Just blank. Put any religion in there. I could be Hindu. I could be Muslim. I could be Christian. I could be Jewish. But the other person that is not that
doesn't understand
because I understand what God is.
Well, I would say that, I've had people say that, well, when you're a Christian, you understand these things, or, well, when us Christians have this, or they understand, I don't.
And the reason why I bring that up is because if God is all powerful, if God is all knowing, and if God is everything and anything, how could you separate your people? Mm-hmm. How could you say that one group or this group or that group is better than the other? How could you say that? The only reason what I would say is a competitive advantage. I'll give you an example, right? And this is a lot when you start looking into things and you start really like investigating and questioning, because that is what a crisis does. A crisis, it's an opportunity to question things, right? The rise of Christianity. You know how the rise of Christianity came about?
No.
So Emperor Constantine, when the Roman Empire was breaking apart, right? And he saw, the fragmentation of the empire and everything that was happening, had a dream, allegedly, in which he saw the cross and he saw this. So then he decided to make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, right? So there was a council that was convened to figure out and pick and choose which verses of the Bible, which books of the Bible were the ones that were going to go in the Bible, But the idea was it really to spread the word? This is the interesting fact, right? Was it really to spread the word, or was it a political maneuver to unify a group? And it worked, because from there we have popes and we have the rise of Christianity in the West, and a lot of that stuff, right? So it was used as a competitive tool to unionize things, and it's ironic enough that when you see a rise of an empire, is somewhat aligned with a rise of a religion that goes in this, because it's a unifying tool. Mm-hmm. It unifies people.
Okay, so then what does that have to do with the Christian or the crisis of faith?
Because you have to understand the reasons why those things happen, right? And how it applies to you as an individual, right? It's just the unification of a group. It's not a bad thing in and of itself. That's not what I'm alluding to. But you have to understand that if you, in your individual life, are questioning, God promises that I'm this child, or and I'm going through these times and I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel lost and I feel confused and I don't see anything that's happening. It's not your fault. And it's not the faith that's the issue. It's the understanding of what it means, right? It's looking at the information of the Bible and looking at all this stuff as really stories of human development, the death and the resurrection, right? My favorite story in the Bible, by far, is the Jesus spending 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. By far. Because as an individual, I could relate to that. Not looking at it as like, oh my God, that is somewhat something that shouldn't be that. Wow, how can he do that? And in reality, it's the same thing that the Buddha did. It's the same thing that Muhammad did. Muhammad went into a cave and meditated and meditated and meditated and meditated until he got inspired, and the Quran was written. The Buddha went into the Bodhi tree and meditated and meditated. They were tempted, right? Almost three the same type of temptations, right? The lost power of the world, lost turn the food into bread. You are God. You could
turn the food into bread.
I mean, turn the rocks into bread. So you have the same similar to sexual, the physical sensations, all that stuff. So you are tempted. And the reason why I like that story and the idea of and again, wrapping it together, the crisis, what it does is that it brings about questioning that you should question your religion as to how you read in it, how you interpret it, how it relates to you, and how it relates to your society, right? So for you, is about transforming yourself, dying to your always, and being born to a new version of who you are, who you could potentially be as a human species, as a human being in this world.
What is a benefit for somebody to do that though? What would
you evolve?
I know what the benefits are, but I'm saying for people who are listening or watching, some people might look at that as like, come on, man, really? We got to go through all that for what? God is God. What's the buy-in for that?
I mean, the thing is, it's like, go on and just keep living if you want to. Just believe in your God and do whatever you want. The problem that you're seeing right now is that you have a fragmented world, right? And people believe in their own ideas of their own reality, right? And still, after all this time, we still are tribal by nature. You know what I mean? But that's not going to serve us in the near future. It's just not. It's not going to serve the individual, and it's not going to serve the tribe because we're not evolving. We're holding on to things without truly understanding what they mean.
What we're holding on to.
What we're holding on to.
And why.
And why we're holding on to.
Right.
We have to question things. Any blockage, any crisis particularly when it comes to faith, you have to question it and ask the questions. And a lot of people say, I see a person, either a pastor or a priest, a rabbi, and they look at this person as the figure of authority. They know everything. No, you need to question what they mean.
But what about for the person who, and I'm just asking you a lot of questions because I'm trying to solicit.
And I know that I'm rambling on.
No. You're making sense. I get it. What you're basically saying is, rather than taking somebody's word for it, own it, discover it, look into it further, and while you're going through a crisis, apply those things when you're going through a crisis and question these things and take the time to sort of figure these things out on your own and come up with a conclusion of your own, right?
Yeah.
Like have your own identity, so to speak. Yeah.
And again, it's like religions, faith, they give us a set of values, right? And those values, if you investigate them, and if you probe them out and you see it, they're legitimate values. However, they're not your values. They'll be given to you. And if you don't question those, then you can't really understand their validity. And you can't really understand what they mean.
So you need to create your own values.
You need to go through the process of confronting the crisis,
which is what I was saying at the beginning of this. When you asked me what is God, it's I think that when you die to that your old self and you start to sort of reinvent yourself or question things, then you start to create your own values while you do that. For example, it's silly, but creating boundaries, when to say no, when to say yes, who to be nice to, who to kind of back off from, etc.
And because, and again, at the end of it all, right, if you really think about it and you want to God is really an idea more than anything. Mm-hmm. It's a concept, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you think about what science is doing right now in regards to answering, like, where do we come from? Where does the universe come from? Mm-hmm. It's a question that is like, there's no answer to it.
Right.
And to say that it's this or that it's that right now without having enough evidence to say that, mm-hmm. we don't know, right? But there is a concept. If you look at the concept itself, is that there is something, we don't know what it is, and there's a point of reference from which everything started. Did somebody create it? We don't know the answer to that question. Mm-hmm. We know that the universe is expanding, that it's made of different elements, that this and that, all this stuff happens, that if you have a certain configuration, lives happens. But the origin of it all, we don't know, mm-hmm. right? And for anyone, I mean, if you really think about it, because that's what we do know right now. We don't know if the Big Bang was something that an entity did, was it self-risen? We don't know. Nobody knows the answer to that, right? So if nobody knows the answer to that, how come people are saying that we know the answers, nobody else does because we're chosen? I mean, think about that. That's preposterous.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother episode.
No, I understand that, right? I get that. I get that that's a completely different episode.
Right. Well, I'm just trying to get at what is the point that you're making with that when it comes to the crisis of faith, when it comes to this.
So the more that we question, mm-hmm. right, and we see and we test values and we test those things that are given to us, mm-hmm. then we begin to actually say, okay, I could use this in my life. Okay. And there's things that I can't use in my life. For instance, one of my favorite people in the entire history of literature, religions, is Christ. Mm-hmm. As an individual, if you look at Christ just as an individual, right? Forget about the poetry, which is what I called, right? Of this God idea, right? How he lived, how accepting he was of anybody and anything, right? There is no greater example of what a person should be like than Christ, right? But Christ is also an idea that should be happening within individuals, right? But the question is, am I strong enough to be to have people spit on my face? You know, I don't know if I could do that, to take that. But think about the level of love, the level of acceptance of anybody, right? Rich, poor, prostitutes, anybody that was the ill-casted during that time, he accepted and loved. Right? Now, I don't see that in our culture, in reality, not even from Christians. And I'm calling out Christians because, you know, that's my background. But do you see that? That level of acceptance that man did. Mm-hmm. You know? So, but you could question the institution of it, right? Because I personally question the institution that's been created around the ideas, but I don't question those ideas. Or no, sorry, let me rephrase that. The institution I question. Mm-hmm. What Christ did, I do not. Okay. And how he lived his life. Just how he lived his life. Forget about, look past the metaphor of the death and the resurrection, because that's something that needs to happen in us. We need to go in that desert, right? That 40 days and 40 nights in that desert, that's that crisis of pushing yourself to really see what life is all about. That it is beyond your own personal gain, that it is beyond, because we are part of a whole. And that's what that symbolism and the metaphorical meaning of those 40 nights and 40 days are, to find that essence in you. And the death and resurrection is the metaphorical reference of things that you have to die for. Like I said, me dying to being naive and being this person to come up as something else, you know? And if that's not happening in you, then you're not using that crisis for the right thing.
But I think it's having that knowledge and understanding that, you know, I am human, I'm imperfect, and that I have this opportunity to do this, you know what I mean? And having a sort of a lens of, or a perspective of gratitude that I have this opportunity. As long as you're open, I think that it could be life-changing.
And that's evolution. And that's how we evolve as individuals. And that's how we evolve as a race, as a collective, you know, to going into that and then coming back with something else.
Okay. Yeah. So to recap this episode, here are the 3 things that we can do to take advantage of a crisis for our personal development. Okay. Number 1, follow the questions. When doubt creeps in, investigate it.
So for me, it was like looking at historical perspectives, right? I mean, particularly the work of Joseph Campbell and the power of myth and all the work that he did on comparative religion that actually helped me out a lot at understanding the metaphorical reference for all these stories. You know, it gave clarity and understanding to like my life and my own individual quest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You should put some links for some of Campbell's work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Number 2, stay open-minded. Life is complex, but there are a lot of common denominators. That's true.
And that's true. I mean, the common denominator is that we need to evolve. And evolution doesn't only happen physically. It's not just passing our genes and procreate, right? That's one aspect. That's an elemental aspect of biology and nature. But it's also in the way that we evolve as individuals, and consequently in the way that we impact our immediate surroundings, the people that we interact with, our society, our world. You know, it's evolving in those things. But the first point has to happen with the individual.
Right.
That's the main thing.
Okay. Good. And number 3, do not become bitter. It's easy to become angry and hateful towards values that no longer serve you. Avoid this at all costs. Not doing this will poison you. Yeah. Not avoiding it will poison you.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I've been struggling with within the last couple of years of my life. Things that have happened to me is how do I maintain that perspective of loving my neighbor and letting go of anger and not holding things in my heart. To understand that the obstacles, the challenges are all part of really helping me transform as an individual,
to develop.
Exactly. And as I move forward and we do things like this and my work and all that stuff, that we're living from a different perspective and hopefully bringing more joy into the world, bringing a little bit more light, making others feel comfortable about pursuing their own evolution and their own process and their own quest.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. We hope you enjoyed this video. Comment below with your thoughts and additional ideas. And remember to stay connected by sharing and subscribing.